Hi, good evening and welcome. It's such a joy to see so many of you on time, ahead of time, actually, and we are grateful. Today, we are going to start with Debbie, who would talk to us about uh, beyond resumes, which is hiring for emotional intelligence and just not about the data that's on the resume. And why we're going to start exactly in another 2, 3 minutes. Just a little heads up that you may not be able to unmute yourself for questions. However, we would highly encourage you to please drop your questions in the chat box. And we also wanted to tell you that this session is getting recorded. However, your chat messages will not be recorded, nor it goes live on Facebook. So you can be rest assured it's confidential. It'll be here. So please be free to ask any questions or share anything that you might want from Debbie in the chat box. And we go live exactly in 2 minutes. Thank you once again for coming and waiting here. I think the countdown begins, and we just have a few more seconds to hit that time, Debbie. And I'm so excited and glad to be hosting you. So it's sharp 6:30 p.m. in India here. However, I do realize that in the participants, we do have people from other countries as well. So they're all on different timing, and we are grateful that you choose to be here in the evening or morning or afternoon or late into the night to understand how you can actually hire the right candidate for the right role, and not just based on the strategic output, but also the human centricity in any leader you may want in the organization. And in order to do this, I have Debbie with me today. And Debbie Muno is the managing director of Genos North America. And she's going to introduce herself, of course, but it's so nice to have her here. She's logged in early in the morning from Florida, the United States. And Debbie, we are so honored as well as grateful to have you here. Before I hand it over, I just want a quick introduction about myself. I'm Vanita Chaudhary, and I'm the founder of Radical Edge Learning Consultants, been in the business of learning and development for more than 2 decades, with around 3 decades of work experience working with leaders across the globe in all functions that you can imagine. It's a privilege to have you all in the room today to talk about something that's very, very closer to my heart. Because in the past, while I was working in the corporate, hiring the right candidate and getting the best out of that talent was not just easy, but it was really like a real roller coaster ride. And coming now beside as a consultant, I also get to see the part where we can help clients like you get there and see what you can do best for yourself and the organization. So, saying that without further ado, this is for all the participants who have just joined us right now. A quick heads up, you may not be able to unmute and ask because we have disabled that option. However, you have the chat box to ask any questions, and we promise you that we will answer it for you today because the session is going to be for around 45 minutes. However, we have the last 15 minutes for question answers and anything else that can get sorted out. And in case you want a copy of this recording or any of the content that might help you take decisions in your organization, please do not hesitate to reach out to Meghna from my company, and we will be happy to support and help you. Debbie, thank you once again, and I hand it over to you now.
Oh, Vinitha, thank you so much for such a warm welcome, and thanks to all of you for taking the time to really take a look at something that is just so crucial and so critical, not in and of its only in and of itself, in the hiring and the selection process. This process we'll talk about today, this assessment, can really help organizations and recruiters to make more informed hiring decisions, but it also sets individuals and organizations up for success when you begin talking about what do you do with these brand new hires once they come on board. So I very much appreciate, and I'm honored and privileged to join you today at all different time zones. And Vinitha, thank you for including me. I cannot be any more excited to talk to you about hiring for emotional intelligence, and in particular, this assessment and this selection report that we call the GENOS Emotional Intelligence Selection Report. So to get us started, if you'll bear with me a little bit, I'd like to give you just a little bit of history to bring us present. And that history starts back in 2016, because in 2016, that is the first time that, according to the World Economic Forum in their Future of Jobs report, now the World Economic Forum puts forth a Future of Jobs report, this one in 2016, it predicts about 4 years and beyond into the future. So in 2016, this is the first time that emotional intelligence landed on the top 10 required job skills for every job that's out there on that list. This happens to be that list. You'll see emotional intelligence with its own place there on that list, its own line item. But what you may not realize is when you look at the other 9 skills on that list, they are tangential to emotional intelligence. In other words, the areas that you see that we've now checked marked are all enhanced and all lifted when someone demonstrates more emotionally intelligent behavior. So while it was great to see EI on that top 10 list, the reality is that what the World Economic Forum was basically saying is by the time we got to 2020, about 80% of all of the skills required for all jobs out there, and I love your phrase, Vinitha, are human-centered skills, emotional intelligence skills. So let's continue on this historical journey. Now we get to the Future of Jobs report in 2018, predicting into 2022. You'll not be surprised to see emotional intelligence on that list. And I know that you're all now looking at the other 9 skills that are on that list based upon the previous slide. In 2019, so I did these chronologically, so 2018 on the left, Future of Jobs. In 2019, LinkedIn did a survey of LinkedIn participants saying, hey, what do you think that companies need the most into 2020? Now they divided that into hard skills and soft skills. Vinitha, you likely say things that we also say, which is there is nothing soft about any of these skills, especially emotional intelligence. We like to call these skills essential skills or power skills. But again, you will see that emotional intelligence has its place on that list. If you look at the remaining 4 on that LinkedIn list and the remaining 9 on that World Economic Forum list, again, about 80% of all the job requirements are emotionally intelligence driven. Now, from 2020 heading into 2021, this came out of Forbes magazine. What are the skills that recruiters were looking for going into 2021? Again, about 80% of that list of those 10 skills are EI-related skills. We looked at the same kind of data as we started moving into 2024. You'll not be surprised now. You've got this list of 9. 100% of the skills on this list are connected to emotional intelligence. And again, what we mean is individuals who demonstrate more emotionally intelligent behavior also demonstrate all of the other skills on this list. Now we're bringing ourselves current. This is the 2020 Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, predicting into 2024 and beyond. Now, because of where we're located, we very closely track the US and Canada. Again, you know this story by now. You see EI on both of those lists. This time there are 15 skills. I know that all of you have started to take a look at the 14 that aren't circled, and you're already making those connections. That overwhelmingly, continually, the skills for emotional intelligence are required in all jobs that are out there. And to bring us really super recent, this is the 2023 Future of Jobs report that's looking at skills on the rise from 2023 into 2027. Now, you can see the areas that we've got checked. These are all increasing in importance, and you can see how many of them are emotionally intelligent connected and where they fall on this graph. They're all largely at the top of this skill set, which are importance growing skills. So I want to give you a moment, because I just give you a whole lot of statistics, to just sort of let that settle for a moment. Let your fingers do the walking on your keyboard. And if it'll take a minute, I've listed all of those skills on the right-hand side of this screen. Go ahead and pop into the chat which of these skill requirements you feel are the most critical for your organization or for your clients or for your work in your day-to-day environments and responsibilities within your organizations or with your clients. I'll leave that up there just for a few moments and give you a chance to go ahead and pop those in.
I have
Now,
marked it in red for you so that it's easy for you to check and type it in the
thank you,
chat
V.
box. Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you, V. That's probably going to end up in the slide after we're done. So thank
Yeah,
you. On the spot
yeah.
feedback. Love it. Yeah. And sometimes people will pop in there like all of them, right? Because when you start really looking at what are your positions, what are your requirements, what kind of culture do you want to drive, what positions do you have open at the moment? Are you trying to recruit for the moment? Are you trying to help your clients with at the moment? It's kind of hard to argue against any of these, but sometimes in the current moment, some things are a little more important than others.
Sure.
Okay, you'll
So
have this. Oh,
we,
go ahead.
yeah, we do have Praveen saying creative thinking, Vasu saying adaptability, and Andy saying collaboration.
Fabulous.
Hiresh
Absolutely
says
fabulous.
empathy and active listening. Sanjoy says all of them, like you just rightly said.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know,
Less
Sanjoy,
typing.
it's so tough to choose which one. And
Yeah.
Sharayu, Dr. Sharayu says communication. In fact, Dr. Sharayu is also my fellow colleague in ISB, where we studied together. And she comes from a very unique industry uh, where hardly women are there. So I'm so glad to have her here in the call. And she's really listening to how to hire better in her, which is predominantly a male dominated industry.
Mhm. Yeah. Very interesting. And thank you for being here. Okay, let's take this funneling, if you'll call it, just kind of packaging this in with where we are historically. And it doesn't matter where we wake up, what time of day it is currently. These are human-centered skills in our very global enterprise and workspaces and marketplaces that all of us need to, number one, be looking for in the hiring process, and then number two, having a commitment to growth and development, to continuous improvement in these areas. Because focusing on emotional intelligence is a singular, wonderful focus, but you can see all of the other skill sets that it brings along with it, which is really quite efficient and productive. So V, you gave me a great setup. Thank you so much. That is me there on the left. In the center is my local partner, Jeff Summers, the other managing director of Genos North America. And to the right, thank you for V for highlighting him. That's Dr. Ben Palmer, the founder and CEO of Genos International and the architect of our Genos assessments. And so the three of us are partners in Genos North America as we work with folks here in North America, our certified practitioners, our alliance partners, our clients, the recruiters who we work with. So we are here to serve this population just as V is in your part of the world to be able to serve you in a timely fashion. So I'd like to give you just a couple more things to think about. Number one, Muriel Wilkins, who is the president of a consultancy here in the United States, was way ahead of her time. You can see that back in December of 2014, she was already saying things like, hey, the data shows that emotional intelligence is a key differentiator between star performers and the rest of the pack. And I love her word choice. And the word choice that she used is that the data that shows that is irrefutable. And so capitalizing on this notion that historically we know that these skills help people to be stronger, more efficient in their roles, have more enhanced well-being that we'll talk about here in a quick moment, I'd like to do a couple things. One, just want to define emotional intelligence for you and then put it in the context of work. So EI is really a set of skills that helps us to perceive, to understand, to manage our emotions in ourselves and in others, helps us respond to those emotions and to intelligently use our emotions. Now, we'll share with you that emotional intelligence is as important as intellect, or IQ, in determining success in life. If you Google that particular notion or topic, you might find it stated that emotional intelligence is arguably more important than IQ or intellect. We're going to conservatively say they are on equal footing and they work together to help people be successful, not only in their roles at work, but also in life. We're here today to talk about an instrument around work, so let's put emotional intelligence to work at work. So EI underlies things like self-awareness, empathy, leadership, resilience, emotional intelligence, and people who demonstrate it facilitate more productive work environments. They help people lead more effectively. They help people engage others. So you can see how important these skills are and why it's really important to hire for them. Even more important now, here we are in this fourth industrial revolution, which is unlike anything that has preceded it. This is the first time that highly intellectualized, highly skilled positions can be supplanted by a program, by artificial intelligence. There's not a day, probably not an hour that goes by that all of us don't learn something more about an advancement in AI. And so because of this industrial revolution really is an emotional intelligence revolution. The things that artificial intelligence can do that humans can't are overwhelming. But there's a whole lot that AI can't do that humans are really great at doing and even better at doing with practice. Artificial intelligence and programs cannot emote, cannot motivate, can't console or inspire or be jubilant or express compassion. So while AI is taking the role of some of the things that it does better than humans, these very human skills are now being completely prized in the workplace, both for job seekers and for organizations who know that if they want a larger market share, if they want to attract more talent, if they want to retain more of that talent, you've got to have a commitment to growing and developing emotional intelligence. Now, we're an EI company, so it's not just us saying this. I wanted to make sure that you knew that. You have thousands of articles out there, like very reputable organizations like the Harvard Business Review, saying these things all the way back to 2017, that the rise of AI is actually driving, making more important emotional intelligence. You'll all not forget that we've all been through a difficult 5 years. So we've gone through the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, quick quitting, resenteeism, and we took a look at during that period, why did employees consider leaving their jobs? And at first glance, according to this chart, it seems like people leave their jobs for more money. It appears that way. But when you take a deeper look at the reasons that people are saying that they're leaving. A better work-life balance. They have a lack of a recognition at work. They want to find a better corporate culture. The company values don't align with their own personal values. They have a lack of a strong relationship with their peers. You see, 59% of the reasons that people were considering leaving their jobs were emotionally intelligent reasons or related to emotional intelligence. Now, what's happening as we continue to move forward? Well, those shifts are continuing. As we look at what the new reset at where we are now, what are the expectations of employees and how does that impact talent attraction, employee attraction, and retention? Well, take a look at these bottom two metrics. 70% of companies have begun introducing new well-being benefits because of the demand of employees. And 82% of employees say it's really important for their organizations to see them as a person, as a human being. You can do that by hiring emotionally intelligent talent and then developing people within the organization for emotional intelligence. You can meet those expectations of the new landscape of work. And we moved beyond COVID into something called the big stay. And that started in 2023. And the big stay is that because of so much uncertainty, which we're still in, people are choosing to stay in their jobs. And so the thing that we have to be really cautious of is, how do we avoid stagnation? If people are staying to avoid the uncertainty of maybe the grass isn't greener, then we have to make sure that we're keeping that talent. So when HR professionals looked at what can we do, what best fosters employee retention and loyalty, you'll see that there are, I don't know, a dozen or so items that are listed there, but we've checked marked the ones that relate to emotional intelligence. And look at number one. The highest ranking reason that people stay is because they have positive relationships with their supervisors. Well, emotional intelligence gets you there. When you recognize people for their work, it takes emotionally intelligent individuals to make sure that they do that. Supportive and inclusive work environments, employee engagement, regular feedback, performance appraisals, right? These are all things with heightened DI within the workplace. You can retain those talents. Now, when you look at the opposite, what drives them away, look what number one is. The highest ranking thing that drives people away is a toxic work environment or a negative culture. How do you mitigate that? Developing the emotional intelligence of your current talent and hiring people who are already bringing higher levels of emotional intelligence into the organization. I just had to put this up there. I know that we don't like slides with a lot of words, but I had to do it. While we're in this era of uncertainty, organizations, if they're going to combat this, have to create cultures of trust and respect, where employees feel valued and appreciated. Feeling appreciated as a human being is the single biggest craving of our humanness, to feel appreciated. Well, you can do that by hiring emotionally intelligent talent and upskilling the incumbent employees in emotional intelligence so that they connect and communicate and collaborate in a way that drives respect, that drives value, that drives recognition and appreciation, and that drives efficiency and effectiveness and productivity. So in the spirit of this, what's the business case for EI? Well, a lot of places you've got more mental injuries that are being filed in workman's comp claims than physical injuries. We know that levels of emotional intelligence positively correlate, have a positive impact on resilience, and negatively correlate with occupational stress. So in other words, organizations who hire people who have higher levels of demonstrated emotional intelligence are more resilient and will experience less occupational stress in the workplace. How great is that? Leaders, Vinitha mentioned leadership, leaders with higher emotional intelligence lead teams who report feeling more positive or pleasant feelings and fewer negative or unpleasant emotions at work. Why is that important? Well, when individuals are experiencing more pleasant or positive emotions, they are at the height of their productivity, their creativity, their innovation. And so this has a definite ROI on the workplace. And of course, organizations around the world are always recommending upskilling their staff in emotional intelligence, because now this creates a mentally healthy workplace. Now you can see how this all ties together, because if we're making people feel valued and appreciated and we have mentally healthy workplaces, we already are ahead of the game in attracting and retaining talent. But there is an ROI for organizations as well. So Gallup study found that poorly managed work groups are on an average 50% less productive. That's a huge number. 50% less productive and 44% less profitable than a well-managed work group. How do you have well-managed work groups? By having team leaders who are upskilled in EI and team members who are upskilled in EI. When you talk about sales, many of you on this call might deal specifically in sales or have a sales need at the moment. Top performing salespeople are 12 times more productive than those at the bottom, 85% more productive than an average performer. And about 2/3 of that difference can be attributed to emotional intelligence. That comes from Daniel Goldman. You find that in his book, Working with Emotional Intelligence. And so this brings us to the topic of our conversation today, which is the GenOS Emotional Intelligence Selection Report. So we know that published psychometric studies show that people who score higher on this assessment also tend to score higher in several really important workplace variables, like their workplace performance, just doing their job more effectively, their leadership effectiveness, their ability to sell, not only sell more in terms of revenue, but to have more trusted collaborative relationships with their prospects and with their customers. Heightened customer service and customer service representatives and employees and executives who have more resilience. Teamwork effectiveness is enhanced, and overall employee engagement. And all of us who have been in this line of work, when Vinitha, when we were getting ready to do this, I thought, boy, how long have I been around assessments? And my calculations show that it's been the last 27 years, so almost 30 years working in this space. I have never been in a discussion with an organization who isn't actively looking to drive more employee engagement. This is a way to do that on the front end of that process. So I'm going to give you a chance to go ahead and let your fingers do the walking again. Using your chat feature, which of these outcomes now do you think is more important or most important for your organization or for your clients or that you're recruiting for? And then if you take a minute and go ahead and pop in their why. So if you picked one of these, give us a quick why. And then if some of those start popping in there,
I
Vineeth,
think
if you want
your
to just go ahead and
workplace,
share a
yeah,
couple.
sure. So
Yep.
I have Sanjoy saying workplace performance and Vasu saying leadership effectiveness. And like I said, Debbie, we have a good mix of business owners, HR leaders, our own Genos practitioners. So it will be interesting to see different aspects from different lenses, and that's interesting. I because I know them, I can make out leadership effectiveness, and I also have teamwork.
Great.
Yeah, so
Yeah, again,
workplace performance and teamwork from the business leaders.
a little bit hard to argue against any of these. Like all of us would take all of these things all of the time, right? But we do look through lenses, and so for the practitioners who are on this session, it might be what your prospects or what your clients are saying or asking you for, or what you're working with them on. For your HR leaders, this could very much be tying into what kind of initiatives do you have in place for your 2025 year. Recruiters, you're certainly looking for certain elements for certain clients, and that could be different for other clients that you're trying to fill positions. But the beautiful thing is that you don't have to pick one. We like to pick one just because we like to see what's timely for you, but these all work in tandem. They all come as kind of the package deal, if you will, within this instrument. So Vineeth has given you all certainly a nice setup about Genos. I thought I would just pop this in there if anybody is new to Genos. We were founded in 2002, excuse me, by Dr. Ben Palmer, who Vineetha kindly put a nice red square around on that slide. And all we do is emotional intelligence. Our goal is to be a leading emotional intelligence assessment and solution provider. I'm really humbly proud to share with you that Ben has done a remarkable job in architecting these instruments. In the last 8 consecutive years, Genos International has landed on Training Industry, which is a really prominent organization here in the US. Every year they produce a top 20 list of the best evaluation, assessment and evaluation companies to work with. And for the last 8 consecutive years, Genos International has landed on that top 20 list. Now that's not the top 20 of EI companies. That is all assessments and evaluations that are out there. So we're incredibly proud and excited about that. And I'm sharing that with you because that should give you some comfort in using these instruments. Really means that these are award-winning and globally recognized instruments with reliability and validity that you can feel really good about. We also earned a gold medal in excellence for leadership development from the Brandon Hall Group. We are global. You might have heard Vineetha say that we have a local focus and a global reach, hence our positioning here in North America and Vineetha's positioning with you in India and your part of the world in Asia. Our instruments are in 33 different countries and 29 different languages. We have a lot of people who have been trained to be able to implement these instruments and use these instruments. And to your point, Vineetha, about a lens, this gives us a beautiful lens about what's going on in the global workplace.
Sure.
Our instruments are underpinned by a lot of science and a lot of research. You don't have to read all of these publications, but it's nice to share that with all of you. And I do want to share with you positioning this instrument. This is a selection instrument. Now, Genos is a full throttle assessment organization in terms of hiring and development. So we do have a different set of assessments and instruments for development, for talent management, and for role transition. Today, we are talking about selection, which is one part of our complete emotional intelligence solution for talent acquisition and talent development. Again, specifically today, we're talking about the selection instrument, which is to only be used in the hiring process. If you've got incumbent employees that you're thinking about when you started seeing all of those statistics and all of those outcomes, well, you can learn a whole lot more about our development assessments. Just reach out to Vinitha. Those are architected differently. They have different outcomes. The way they're presented is different. And so today we're focusing on the hiring instrument, again, different than the development instruments. So let
Thanks,
me give
Debbie.
you,
Actually,
oh, go ahead,
sorry.
Vinitha.
I'm so glad you clarified it. I actually had, based on our advertisement and information on LinkedIn, I had few individuals from organizations reaching out to me asking, can I take the selection report for my own self and see where I stand? And I think this is a right answer in you clarifying that selection report is only for hiring, people who hire. And if you want to know how EI as a person you are, then please do take our development reports, which is self assessment, 180 or 360, and definitely not selection. And that's very important for our practitioners in the room today so that they can talk confidently to their clients that selection report is only for hiring. And that
Absolutely,
quickly
Vinitha.
leads me to a question, Debbie. We also have few recruiters who run recruitment company.
Yeah.
So they do the screening, they do the first level, they understand the profile. So they have the job description, they know the candidate, and they actually send the right candidate to the company. So, how would they then use? Should I park this question for later, or should I ask you right away because we are talking about different kind of reports?
Yeah, no, we can park it for a little bit to the back end, but I
Sure,
want to give you just a quick answer because I don't want to leave you hanging.
sure,
Recruiters could use this instrument in the same way that an organization's recruiting department internally is using it, or the
sure,
same way that a practitioner might be using this instrument to help a client with their hiring. The
sure.
instrument's quick. It's about 15 minutes for the candidate to take. It is built for this position of pre-employment. And so the way that the questions are presented to the candidate is different than they are in the development
Right.
assessments. It has a couple things built into it that we're going to talk about in terms of accounting for socially desirable responding. All of that would be really helpful for recruiters to know. And the biggest element is once the scoring comes back, included in this report, because it's kind of twofold, right? It's an assessment and it's an interview evaluation guide that make up the report. And so there are competency specific, behaviorally oriented interview questions that are included in the report. So recruiters can be using this in the same way to learn more about their candidates for their clients, as those of you in HR can use it in terms of bringing people into your organizations, and the same with practitioners who are helping their organizations to hire with. Everybody's going to do the same thing. It's going to measure these 7 emotionally intelligent competencies. Each of these 7, I'm going to give you just a quick hit. You know, most of you, some of you might know some of these things, but for those who aren't aware, I'll give you the speed course. So self-awareness is the skill of really perceiving and understanding how we're feeling at any given time. I know that sounds like, of course I know how I'm feeling, Debbie. My feelings are in my head. I take my head with me everywhere I go. I always know how I feel. But the research shows us that human beings are completely unaware of how they're feeling about 85% of the time. Yep, the way that we feel influences all of the decisions that we make, our behavior, our facial expressions, our tonality, our body language. And so self-awareness is really crucial. People who demonstrate a lot of self-awareness, have the capacity to really identify and understand the impact that their behavior has on their thoughts, their decisions, their feelings, and their performance at work. And so the way that you read this model is when people are demonstrating a lot of these competencies or demonstrating them frequently, they're in a productive state. In self-awareness, that would be present, meaning that they're dialed in with how they're feeling. If people aren't demonstrating self-awareness, then they tend to be disconnected. They might not be aware that having an explosion really disrupts the team for the rest of the day. They're disconnected from how their behavior impacts others. Awareness of others is the same thing, just turned outward. The skill of understanding other people's emotions. And then people who really are demonstrating awareness of others, this is where you see that the productive side is being empathetic. Really understanding how to engage with others, how to motivate and connect with others. In my old days, like when I was young, we would have called that interpersonal effectiveness, right? That might have appeared on a job description. Emotional expression is expressing our own feelings effectively. Are we expressing our emotions in the right degree, in the right place, to the right time, and to the right person? When we do that, we create a better understanding among our colleagues. We create trust and perceptions, as you'll see, of genuineness. That's why the productive side is being authentic. You can see how destructive the unproductive side can be if you're being really guarded or siloing your information or creating kind of false harmony. Now, emotional reasoning is our decision-making competency. It's the skill of using the information in feelings along with all the facts and the figures and the scientific data. When we do that, we're said to be expansive. In other words, we're using all of the available information to make decisions. Now, it might not change the decision, but it almost always changes how the decision is presented, because now we're considering how we feel about that decision and how the people who will be impacted by that decision might feel. And that might change how we say what we want to communicate. When we do that, again, we're using all the available information. It's expansive. Depending upon your age, I am 58. When I first started working, I was told not to think about feelings, to leave that. Debbie, check your emotions at the door. It's not part of it's just a business decision. Well, first of all, our feelings come with us. They come from our brains. They are with us all day long. And there's a tremendous amount of valuable information in our feelings. We can't leave them out. They're with us. So the idea about emotional intelligence is using them intelligently and productively. If we try to drop them out, you can see that the unproductive side is limited. It would be a bit like trying to run the 400 in the Olympics with one leg tied behind your back. It's a limited effort. Self-management is the skill of effectively managing our own emotions. And so when we're aware of our emotions and self-awareness, then we become aware of others' emotions and awareness of others, and we begin to dial into how do we express those emotions in a genuine and authentic way and use those emotions to make better decisions. Now we get to how do we respond in every circumstance? Do we respond or do we react? You see that the productive side of self-management is being resilient. And people who are resilient or demonstrate a lot of self-management have better job satisfaction, they're more engaged in their work, they can cope with high stress demands, they do have that interpersonal effectiveness, they're more productive, they have stronger workplace performance, and they have an enhanced sense of well-being. Remember that whole lesser occupational stress? This comes from developing self-management. Now, people who don't demonstrate a lot of self-management are said to be temperamental. These are the folks, we have an expression here in America where we might say you feel like you're walking on eggshells around them. You just never know quite what version of them that you're going to get. That's really unproductive and can be so unproductive for not only the individual, but for their teams. Now we're rounding it out here. We come to management of others. And this has to do with how we influence the moods and emotions of others with how we're being, how we maneuver through the day, how we communicate. People who are really good at demonstrating management of others can really create and generate a high capacity for productivity and performance in the people around them. These are people who create really positive work environments. They can deal with a lot of occupational stress and workplace conflict effectively. You'll know these people in organizations because they're the people who everybody's trying to clamor to get onto their team, because being part of their team feels good and they're included. This is really empowering, which is the productive side. Now, people who aren't considering the management of others, aren't interested in how what they say influences others, are said to be indifferent. And I think sometimes people think that indifference is neutral. Most decidedly is not. If you have someone who you love and they tell you, well, I'm indifferent to you, that is definitely not neutral. When people feel that somebody doesn't care about them, that is really unproductive. Remember the whole statistics we talked about people wanting to feel valued and appreciated in the workplace. One of the best ways to do that is to hire people who have higher demonstrations of management of others, and then develop that within your current existing force. And we'll round this out with self-control. Self-control is the skill of effectively controlling strong emotions. So people who have this skill set, who demonstrate this frequently, think really clearly in stressful situations. These are the folks, when there's a fire drill, you want to be next to a person who demonstrates a high level of self-control. They're really centered. They're really good in times of stress, of maintaining calm and moving forward. First responders who are really, really good at their job have high levels of demonstrated self-control. They remain calm when everybody else is not. Now, the unproductive side, of course, is being reactive and not being able to handle that. So you can see how these 7 competencies are just so crucial in the workplace. I'm going to give you a chance, and Vinitha, I'm going to give people a chance to kind of chat in there, and I'll move on in the sake of time to the next slide, but then you can kind of pop in and let me know what people have said. Because with those descriptions, what are you feeling is kind of rising to the top in terms of right now, maybe a priority interest in some of these competencies? Or maybe you're trying to hire for a job that's especially difficult to hire for, and 1 or 2 of these competencies are sort of the missing it factor in that job. If you just knew this about your candidates, you might have a much better chance of them being successful. So I'll give you a moment to go ahead and pop some of those things in the chat.
Sure. So, Debbie, the answers are coming.
Oh,
However, there's a question from one of our participants, Rajshri. She says, isn't there an overlap between emotional expression and self-management and maybe even self-control?
interesting. I look at these as a tapestry. They weave together and they influence each other. So emotional expression is about being authentic. Are you trustworthy? Are you expressing how you feel accurately? Not falsely. You know, any of you who have a partner, if your partner says to you, or if Jeff says to me, is everything okay? And I say, I'm fine. I'm most decidedly not fine. That's an example of emotional expression and being guarded, right? Now, self-management is how do we manage our responses to workplace events? So to be stronger in self-management, you can see the connection to self-awareness. But self-awareness is just recognizing how do I feel? Self-management is what do I do with that? What do I do with that? Self-control is and you're right in this, it is an expression, an extension, I could say, of self-management. Self-management is how do I respond to emotions in the workplace and to those negative or unproductive emotions. Self-control is a more intense version of that. When the emotions are really strong, how do I respond to that? They are similar yet slightly different. And for some jobs, that self-control, that differentiation becomes really crucial. Thinking of things like, and thank you for the heads up, the places where this is used, you can use this in any job, for any position, anywhere, but you will find that this instrument is used in places like forward-facing, sales jobs, customer service jobs, but also jobs that have a high amount of stress. Think about things like first responders, air traffic controllers, people in customer service, because nobody, well, that's pretty absolute. Almost nobody picks up the phone and calls customer service to say, hey, I just wanted to tell you your product is great. Customer service take a beating all day from people who are experiencing some problem with some product. So the resilience required. So while you can use it anywhere, most frequently in forward-facing jobs, leadership positions, and people who are on or in a team, which basically means almost everybody in the workplace. These things are really important. Now, let me give you a little heads up about the assessment itself, because I'm mindful of our time and want to give you questions. So there are 70 questions in this instrument. We're asking how often somebody demonstrates emotionally intelligent workplace behavior. Now, we're asking the candidate to self-report. And so how do we gauge for that? Because somebody can say, I do all of these things all of the time. Well, we've added 12 questions to detect what we call in the assessment business socially desirable responses. And Janos has broken that detection into 3 levels. That we are measuring inflation. Inflation is someone's tendency to have an overly inflated view of their ability. So they might actually believe that they demonstrate emotionally intelligent behavior more than they really do. Those of you who are familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, this is part of that. Human beings tend to either over or underestimate their demonstration of emotional intelligence. Just like on some talent shows, sometimes you have a singer who overestimates their ability to sing a Whitney Houston song. They think that they sound like Whitney, but they really don't. So we can measure inflation, sort of that subconscious thing. We also measure manipulation. Manipulation is a very conscious effort to answer in a way that sounds better, or answer in a way that they think the organization or the recruiting organization would want them to answer. Well, these 12 questions address that, and we can measure inflation. And then lastly, we're measuring inconsistency, because among these 70 items, some of them are paired up. And so when somebody trips those pairs, so example of in one they say up and the other they say down, which aren't responses to this instrument, but it's a good example. Well, that sort of trips that inconsistency trigger. And based upon how much, if any, somebody has inflated, manipulated, and or been inconsistent, the scores on the assessment are adjusted downward accordingly, so that what the assessment produces is a more real-time report. You get a better look at what that person is probably really demonstrating. It's quick, 12 to 15 minutes. It's timed. They have 30 minutes to complete it. This is because we're trying to mitigate them Googling terms or phoning a friend. They only get one question at a time, randomized by each of those 7 competencies, and they can only click back screen to one screen. All of these are technological advances to try to get the most accurate response from the candidate. The best, news of all is that these results are available immediately. Now, this instrument is benchmarked. It is a normed instrument. It's got almost 5,000 people in the norm, and we've included some of the details in there. The reason that we tell you that is because you can be confident that you can use this instrument for any position in any organization anywhere in the world. It's going to tell you how someone is measuring compared to average demonstration of the population, above average demonstration of the population, below average demonstration of the population. I'm going to reiterate, V and I have talked about this a little bit, but it's only to be used in the hiring process and only by stakeholders. This report is never to be shown to a candidate, because in this report, you get an overview, the model and the scores of the model, a summary of how the candidate has scored for each competency, and then the 3 lowest behaviors that they scored in. And that's just really additional helpful information in making a hiring decision. Now, I mentioned it has other components. So along with the assessment, you get behaviorally oriented, competency-specific interview questions. You can ask of your candidate to dig deeper around emotional intelligence. You can score the responses to that interview, so you get a chance to kind of capture your real-time impressions of that candidate's interview, and a place to summarize all of your thoughts and notes. So just a quick overview. We've talked about published psychometric studies show that the higher you score on this assessment as a candidate, the more likely you are to score higher in these really important workplace variables. We've also talked about the fact that this report should never be shown to a candidate, and that once the candidate is onboarded, if you want to take them down a development path, and or you want to take your existing employees on a development path, then you need to use a different catalog of assessments or development suite, and Vinitha can certainly help you with those assessments. I mentioned those 3 socially desirable responding indices or validity indices that we talked about. We actually give you the scores for them. You'll see that on the right-hand side of the screen. So you can tell if someone inflated a lot, a little bit, or very low. You can tell if somebody manipulated hardly at all or not at all or a lot. You can tell how inconsistent they were. That's incredibly valuable information at the onset of this instrument. And then you get the model, which we reviewed, and the definition of the competencies and the outcomes, so you don't have to remember what we talked about in this session. It's right in that report for you. And then because it is a normed assessment, we're going to show you how to read the scores. So you can see I mentioned population comparison. On the left-hand side of their screen, there's an example. Somebody scored a 78 in a competency. Well, what does that mean? Well, you can simply read the grid. If you go to the middle of that grid where it says average, Scores between 41 and 60 are average. That means that that is the level that the average person in the population demonstrates these competencies. So when you get below 41, 21 to 40 is low, meaning they'll demonstrate that competency less than the average. 1 to 20 is that they're going to demonstrate that much less than the average. And on the other side, 61 to 80 means high. They're going to demonstrate that competency more often than the average person. And 81 to 99 is very high. They'll demonstrate that competency much more often than the average person. And that is like a big bonus because people who score in that very high range can actually help the people around them elevate their demonstration of emotional intelligence simply by the way that they are being with them, the way they talk with them, the way they interact with them, the way they collaborate with them. So you get a set of scores for all 7. You can see I've highlighted emotional reasoning because it's in the very low category, standing out from the other scores that you see. You also get a total EI score there at the top. I'm going to use emotional reasoning to share with you how to read the rest of that report. Once score, we're going to tell you in the report, now this isn't just for the low scores, this is for all of them, just using this as an example. What is emotional reasoning, that definition? How did they score? You see a 19. What does that mean? So under the image, you see that they scored in the very low range, and we tell you what that means. What are their lowest scoring areas? Those are the areas to explore. So those are lowest 3 in this competency. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see those interview questions that we talked about. As you're asking those interview questions, at the bottom, there's a place for you to kind of give them a score on how they answered the interview questions. So in real time, you can capture your impressions. Now, those questions have a methodology. The first 2 questions are designed to measure their mindset and their knowledge about the competency. The second 2 are what have they done to put it into practice. And the third 2 questions, or questions 5 and 6, are what are the outcomes. So if you're me, the way that I say that in shorthand is, well, what does the candidate know, what they do, and how did that work out for them? And by asking those questions, here's some of the samplings from emotional reasoning. You can ask all of them, some of them, none of them, but it does help you to dig deeper and learn more about your candidate. And the whole point of that is to make a more informed hiring decision. Place to summarize it all in the back, all of the impression scores, place to write down their strengths, place to write down their opportunities for growth and development, anything recommended for further areas to investigate, or questions for future references. So this instrument, in 15 minutes, you learn so much about your candidate. You have a very actionable report. Again, you can see it is specifically and solely designed for selection. It's got interview questions. It's just talent acquisition. If you want to have the full throttle system, you've got the selection report to screen and do an interview. And then you've got the development suite to onboard candidates for growth and development and a whole cadre of development programs to further their development. And again, Vinitha can help you with those. So as I close, these are some of the reasons people use emotional intelligence and use GenOS, both in the selection side and also in the development side. Some of these might ring true for you too. Many organizations are trying to get at their core values. Well, if you look at the 7 competencies of this model and some very common core values of organizations, you can see that we're measuring many of those core values. How great that organizationally you can do that with your candidates. So why put it into your selection process? Well, we know it's powerful. We know that it correlates to the things that are really important to you as a recruiter, as an organization, as an HR professional, as a practitioner helping your clients. I wanted to do one last thing and then View will close and open for questions. I went on to ChatGPT and said, can you give me a job description for a sales position? And this is verbatim. I just copied it and put it on this slide. So generically, what would a sales position look like? Now, how powerful and how important is emotional intelligence in recruiting? Everything on this page that has a purple check mark is an emotionally intelligent skill that you can get at in the selection report. And every check mark on this page is an emotional intelligence skill and tangent of emotional intelligence that the GenOS EI selection report can help you get at. These things are the things that people are desiring in their salespeople. Well, you can measure that ahead of time. How powerful is that? I did the same thing with just a generic management position and did those correlations, and you can see the same exact thing. We don't measure for everything. We do measure for those somewhat intangible human-centered skills that Vinitha talked about at the onset. So you've got a tremendous value here. You can implement it into your organization with your clients. Contact Vinitha for pricing and for function. But I thank you for taking the time to learn more about this instrument, because it is a piece of the selection process. Should only account for about 1/3 of it, yet that is a powerful piece that correlates to hiring employees who are more resilient, with better, more enhanced well-being, who can influence their job performance, their leadership effectiveness, the people around them, and the ROI of their departments and the organization, all within about a 15-minute assessment. So V, thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for attending, and open it up for any questions that anybody has.
So, Rajshri seems to like our assessment for sure. Maybe we can stop sharing, Debbie, so everyone can see you on full screen.
Absolutely, let me do that.
So there is a question, Debbie. This is something that I've written. So the first question that I have for you, and I'm sure some of us in the room can quickly resonate. How can hiring managers in the organization and recruiters balance EI data, that is, which has come from the report, with other skills like technical skill, cognitive ability, sometimes it's intuition? How do they take the decision? Because here I have a EI report, whereas I still want to explore more. What is your take on that?
Absolutely. And I love the question, because it's something that we encourage organizations to do all of the time. This instrument, the GenUs EI selection report, should never be used as the only reason that someone gets a job or doesn't, or gets hired or doesn't. It is meant to be an ingredient in the recipe, if you will, of selection. And so most organizations already have a lot of ingredients in that process. There is an application or a resume, which was part of the title of this session, right? There might be certifications or licensures that they're requiring, or demonstrated skill set that are very technical skills, or hard skills, as we might call them, that are specific to that position. All of those things should be part of that recipe. This is just an additional ingredient that you can put into that recipe that picks up the measurement of the things that everything I just mentioned doesn't. I mean, we can, when we're interviewing somebody, we can kind of get a feel for someone. If you have a good set of intuition, you can feel if you've connected with them or not. But not everybody has the same level of that kind of intuition. And the other thing is, words are challenging, because, hey, if I was a candidate and Vinitha, you asked me, well, Debbie, do you get along with your teams? Absolutely, I do. I'm a great collaborator. Um, it is no different than here in Florida. We do not have our body weights on our driver's licenses. So if they go to that, but it's self-reporting, I could give them any number, right? I can say anything. But if I show up at the Department of Motor Vehicles, if they do that and they say, well, we don't care what you tell us, could you please get on this calibrated scale? Well, now that's a different thing, because they're getting a calibrated measurement of my body weight. And that's what we're doing with this instrument. That extra ingredient is a calibrated measurement of these seemingly intangible things that are so crucial, these human-centered skills. Well, now we can measure them, and we can measure them in a way that enables, in the recruiting process, not
Yeah.
only the measurement of them, but really specific questions to learn more about those skills. So thank you for the question.
Absolutely. No, and I'm glad you answered that. And that also reminds me, when you were saying is, as a recruiter or a hiring manager, my unconscious bias goes away, because one, I have this tangible results, and the questions which are in the selection report are so well structured that it automatically removes the bias, and I get into the mindset and the practice, and what are you
And the
planning to do?
outcomes.
That's
Yeah,
fabulous. Yeah.
yeah, good point.
I have two
Absolutely.
questions for you again from Andrea, is our Genos practitioner from Sri Lanka. And she says, Debbie, what would be an assessment that you may use alongside with EI in selection?
Oh, in the selection process, Andrea?
That's right. Yeah.
Question? Yeah, we have organizations, clients, and practitioners here who use lots of things in conjunction with the Genos EI selection instrument. And when I say lots of different things, mostly a personality assessment. So, and there are, a library of different personality assessments. But because Genos is measuring something that's not personality, when you have a personality assessment and you add the Genos to it, each of those assessments as a standalone is powerful, but when you put them together, they almost enhance the other one. Remember, you're just getting one extra really powerful ingredient to learn more about your candidate. And the more that we know about our candidate, the more informed hiring decisions that we can make, and the more effectively we can help the career pathing of that candidate if they are moving from candidate to employee. The more that we know about them, the more effective we can help them be and the better we can support them. But most frequently, it would be some kind of personality assessment in conjunction.
Oh. And Sanjoy says first filtering technical skills and EI assessment in the next phase. Would that be a suggestion?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can, and that's the great thing I think about Genos, because the instrument is quick. Organizations can decide what does their I'm going to call this an investment funnel look like. An investment could be dollars and cents. Sorry, that's a US term. And so investment can be money, that can be currency. Investment is also time. So one of the great things about the EI selection is it doesn't have to be proctored. You send a link, someone takes it, it's 15 minutes. So we have a lot of organizations that use it early in the process as a screener, right? Because they're saying it takes an hour to go through our technical assessment, and that assessment is an investment. So, but if they have all the technical skills and no people skills, they might not be considered for this leadership position. Let's see what their people skills look like. Let's see what their EI looks like first and use that as first part of the process. And we have other organizations that do it in reverse. They want to ensure that they have those technical skills first, because if they don't, they're not going to consider them because they have to have them. And then the next pass is an EI skill. This really comes down to process, priority, existing functions in an organization, and a discussion, Vinitha, with you or with Andrea or with any of the practitioners who they're working with on where is the placement? Where does it make the most sense for that placement to happen?
Sure. Great. So Vasu, one of our practitioners from Chennai, is asking best practices to promote this product, but I will take that as a separate information from you and give it to my practitioners.
Sure.
I have one last question. Should I be Genos certified to do a selection report in my organization?
Oh, that's a really good question. So while we do have a lot of people inside organizations who have completed the certification process, meaning that you have gone through Vinitha's course, which is the Genos certification course. You know how to read and interpret all of our instruments in our development suite. That also includes the ability to use the selection assessment. If you are solely in recruitment, going through the certification process are skill sets that at this particular point in your career you're probably not going to use. So you can become trained in just the selection assessment. It is a quick process. We have a quick training video. You can go through that video and then come back with Vinitha and ask any questions and make sure that you understand how to read what you're seeing. But because selection is built differently, the outcome is different. The interpretation in that instrument actually happens in the assessment. You just need to use it effectively. You don't have to, if the rest of your scope of work doesn't dictate that a certification would be productive, you can just use the selection, but you do need to go through that training. If your work spans hiring and development, then absolutely go through the certification process for that reason.
Lovely. So Debbie, I know we have 1 minute past the time that we have really asked you for, but thank you so very much for clarifying so much and also giving us a clear understanding of how you can hire, not just for strategic purposes, but for the whole sum. Because today, I think in the world that we are living in, we need any candidate who's wholesome and not just a part of it that can even ruin organization. So, and I still remember, Peter Drucker's fantastic quote which says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So when you
Yes.
don't have that culture, you don't have the people to support your strategy, anyway, you're ruined. So thanking you once again. Have a fantastic day at Florida. And
Thank you.
thank you everyone here in all the countries that you've joined in once again. And any information we will be happy to share with you. You can also connect with us to know about the selection report. And I'll be happy to share and have a discussion with you as well. Thank you once again, everyone. Good evening.
Thank
Good
you,
day.
everyone. Have a
Bye bye.
wonderful
Thanks
evening.
once again, Debbie. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.